Thanks for checking in to the State of Basketball Podcast, Episode 2. I'm Adam Miller, and I'm here with Jaron Wilt. Each and every week, we're going to be bringing you the news and notes and recapping each week on all 11 Division I basketball schools in the state of Indiana, because in 49 states,
it's just basketball.
All right, man, let's get into it. So this week, we had 23 games, which included one in-state matchup between IUPUI and Valparaiso. So in those 23 games, obviously, one team had to take a loss in the IUPUI Valpo. So going to be a different number. The record's going to be a different number than the total games. But there were 23 games, and the Indiana teams went 18-6, which is pretty good for the first week.
Yeah, for the first week, it's definitely not bad at all.
I mean, especially when you think about how many mid-majors are in the state and how many bye games they were involved in.
Yeah, for sure.
Or honestly could have been involved in, because I feel like a lot of them were not involved. We're not going to big schools this week.
Yeah, they were on the positive end of the bye game spectrum, where they were playing
small teams,
smaller teams.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I want to rank each team. Like, I want to rank all 11 teams. We're gonna go through and talk about each team individually, but let's just rank them. I mean, why not?
Yeah.
Why not? Give us something.
It's a smart thing to do each week. It'll give us an idea of, like, where we have that kind of like a baseline. And we could even talk about, from week to week, how they've maybe changed based on their performance each week. Because again, like you said, there's some teams that did play bye games, and they were maybe on the receiving side of the payment of the bye game, but then there's also teams that were on the paying side.
Yeah.
So once we get into the conference play, I think it'll really give us a good indication of really how these teams are panning out.
Yeah.
In terms of success.
And it'll be helpful for our listeners wondering, like, okay, how do I consider Purdue Fort Wayne dropping 130 versus Indiana State going into Alabama and losing,
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. It's hard to, it's really, that's a tough, like, thing to really, like, consider.
If you ever want to call it apples to oranges, that's as apples to
oranges
as you can get.
Yep.
But you want to start with number one, Jaron? Who are we taking it? Who do you want to take at number one this week?
This might come as no surprise, but the Purdue Boilermakers, I think, are clearly far and away the number one team in our personal power rankings, as well as the country.
Yeah.
And every expert analyst.
If you're number one or if you're top five according to everyone, and you're number one in every predictive metric, how are you not going to be one in the state?
Yeah. So that's on a 2-0 record.
Yeah.
It's. I think
that was the easiest.
That was the easiest decision. Yeah. I think we came to.
Number two is going to be maybe a shocker, but I think based on what they showed this week, they went 3-0. I think Purdue Fort Wayne is number two.
The Dons.
Yeah.
Their opponents felt the rumble this week. That's for sure.
Yes. And I was able to catch a game this week. I was able to catch their game against Texas A&M Commerce, and we'll discuss that later. But I think the Dons looked great. I think we got to have them at number two here.
Yep. Coming in at number three, we've got Indiana State University. They did go 1-1.
Okay.
But they played Bama, and they lost to Bama. And I think that is, they played well. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but I think that they deserve the number three spot based on kind of the performance that they had in those two games this week.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Bama's tough. I think Bama's going to be really good. Yep. And they were in it for the first 30 minutes, and then it started to fall apart. Bama just couldn't get rid of them for a while. But number four, it's Sunday night. We just got done watching this game together. IU went 2-0, so you would think that they would be above a team that went 1-1, but we got to take IU at number four, and that might be generous.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, the hardest decision that we made when ranking these 11 for sure.
Yeah, because so many teams have potential, but you look at what they're doing on the floor, and it's like, not great.
Yeah, they're just not quite there yet.
All right, who's next?
Number five, Ball State, the Cardinals. They went 2-0 this week. Defense picking up where they left off, and I think that they're definitely worthy of a top five spot in our.
I like them there. Number six, we've got Butler. Also went 2-0. I think that they looked pretty good. They've got some things to work on, but I think 6 is a great spot to have them there.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming at number 7 is Evansville. It's they look good for having a young team, and I think that they're going to do well this season. I think based on what we've seen.
I'm really excited to talk about Evansville.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm really looking forward to talking about them. I really liked what I saw, and we'll just wait till we get there. Number 8, Notre Dame, 1-1. But I like the accountability that Shrewsbury had about it. So
Yep. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, I think they're a good way to round out the 8 spot. And then coming in at 9, this is kind of where it got tough for us. These last 3, but we got IUPUI. They went 2-0.
mm-hmm.
They were part of, like we said, one of those in-state matchups. So they've had some interesting showings this week.
Yeah, I mean, this is where you get to looking at it and you're like, well, either IUPUI is going to be 1-1 or Valpo is going to be 1-1.
Right.
So one of them had to be 1-1. So
Yeah.
No surprise. Number 10 is Valparaiso.
We just can't put them above IUPUI when they lost to IUPUI. So
I think KenPom has them above IUPUI. Maybe it was close, but when you win head to head, you have to be above. I mean, that's just how it works, in my opinion. And who's coming in last, Jaron?
Unfortunately, the Screaming Eagles of Southern Indiana. They were one of 2 teams that played 3 games, and they unfortunately lost all 3. So I just think that that was kind of the easier decision for that 11th spot.
Yeah, in the same way that it's hard to not put IU up high when they went 2-0, it's hard to not put USI down in last when they went 0-3 this week, and no one else has a below 500 record.
Right, for sure.
So our rankings: Purdue 1, PFW 2, Indiana State 3, IU 4, Ball State 5, Butler 6, Evansville 7, Notre Dame 8, IUPUI 9, Valpo 10, and then rounding out number 11 is University of Southern Indiana. So you want to?
This is going to be the fun part. Now we're gonna break down, what we saw from all 24 games, or I guess all 23 games that happened this week.
Yeah, some of them we were able to tune into more than others, but
it's hard when there's 17 games going on at the same time on ESPN Plus,
and they're all on ESPN Plus, dude. Yeah, every single one.
It's nothing wrong with ESPN Plus, but it makes it hard to go back and watch all those games. But we were able to catch quite a few.
Mm-hmm. Most of them, or I think we had
eyes on.
Both of us had eyes on almost all of them, and one of us had eyes on all of them. So each game was watched by all of us.
But starting with Ball State, first thing I want to talk about, the one game they played this week was against Old Dominion in the inaugural MAC Sunbelt Challenge. It is a MAC versus Sunbelt competition, for both men's and women's basketball. The MAC teams got all home games this go around, and then they'll play a second set of games shortly after the new year, which is really interesting. That I think it's a late January, early February matchup, but it's one of those things that, like, usually you're in conference play, right? Like usually that time of the season is strictly in conference opponents. But that I think it was a random draw to determine.
I think so.
It might have been based on kind of preseason rankings, but come February, the second set of games is going to be based on the current at the time net rating, which I think is going to be really cool. That they're going to be able to pair up the more competitive MAC teams versus the more competitive Sunbelt teams. And it's really cool because they're playing the conference gets a belt,
a literal wrestling belt.
Yeah, a wrestling style championship belt. Yeah. It's gonna pass between the two conferences, which I think is fucking sick. You don't expect it's like basketball. Why is there a wrestling belt?
I'm all for wrestling.
I'm not asking questions. I don't care why it's
I'm
a
all
wrestling
for wrestling
belt.
Belts and everything.
I think it's absolutely sick. And it's gonna be really fun to watch, especially because it breaks up the monotony of conference play.
Yeah,
which I think
the January, them playing again in January reminds me a lot of like the old bracket busters they used to do, where they would have people, like teams who had similar at-large resumes, and they would play each other.
Yeah.
But these two conferences, it's nice. I wish more schools would do that because it's interesting to see teams play each other in November, but you're a completely different team in January. Yeah. So it's like it would be really nice if, a Big Ten team could play an SEC team in the middle of January instead of,
And
playing
it
Big
gives
Ten
a good
basketball over and
baseline
over.
too, like of those higher net ranking teams. It gives a good baseline if they're in a potential spot to make the NCAA tournament or even
Mhm.
the NIT and play well in either of those tournaments. It gives them a good idea of how do they compare to teams that are comparable to them.
If you have similar
Um,
resume, like,
yeah.
you can definitively say like, hey, this team should probably be above that one.
Yeah, and it just helps you get ready for that tournament. But speaking of Ball State, like we said in our power rankings, they were 2-0 this week. They played Goshen and Old Dominion. The Goshen game, it was like we said, it was a bye game for them,
Yeah.
and definitely one that they should have won.
Right, but doesn't count towards their official record, correct? Because Goshen's not a Division I team.
I believe so.
I believe that's how it works.
Yeah.
So
I mean, watching that, I watched that game pretty closely. It was really interesting because Ball State, like we've said, they're a defensive team.
mhm.
They are actually switching their defenders 1 through 5. Like it was any player on the Ball State team could guard any position on the Goshen team.
Yeah.
That's largely probably because of the mismatch in size and in talent.
Yeah.
But it was really, I thought that was a bright spot because it shows that they can do that potentially once they get into conference play.
Yeah, hopefully they'll have some defensive switching going on. Maybe not a true 1 through 5, but maybe a 3 through 5 or a 1 through 3 or something, so that they can be just able to switch everything and able to cover more teams a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, that's really all I felt like I could take from that first game.
Yeah.
I was more locked into the second one.
I will say that Bashir Jihad, we talked about him a little bit
Yep.
in our season preview. He had big shoes to fill by taking the 5 spot from Peyton Sparks because of the transfer. I think that if that game is any indication that Jihad's going to do all right this season. He played really well. He got into some foul trouble, which I think is something you definitely need to figure out in the early season. But he was involved in some pick and pop. I think he might have scored Ball State's first basket with a 3-pointer that he shot from the top of the key.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about him because he went out quick in the Old Dominion game too. He got 2 quick ones in the first 4 minutes against Old Dominion too, which I was a little bit worried about seeing him go out that early again, because you wonder, a lot of the times that's something that people will struggle with the whole season, and it just
True.
But I mean, the MAC is pretty physical, so hopefully they can get him to be playing fine and by that time.
It's interesting the dynamic. I compared him to Peyton Sparks. Peyton Sparks drew a lot of fouls last season.
Yeah.
That was one of the best things he brought to the team was his ability to draw a foul. Well, now you have a guy replacing him who's picking up a lot of fouls.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something that they need to work on.
Yeah.
But other than from what I saw from him, just from while he was on the court playing, it was pretty impressive. Another guy that impressed me, Jalen Anderson. He's a Loyola Marymount transfer. He's played some big games. They're not in an easy conference. He played against some top 25 teams throughout his time there. The moxie that he plays with, he reminds me a lot of Wesley Matthews Jr.
Interesting.
Just the swagger and the energy that he brings to the team. He rocks the same kind of headband. So Wes was never the primary ball handler,
mm-hmm.
and Jalen Anderson is. So that's obviously a big difference in their style of play. But he's when the ball's not in his hand, he's always in the right spot. He's always making the right cut. He'll post up in the corner for an open 3 if he needs to. He brings so much energy to that team.
Yeah.
That I think that he's an incredible spark to their offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's a guy that can definitely be like a tough shot maker.
Yep.
When, the ball's sticking and they are sitting there and they've gone 3 minutes without a bucket, you can give it to him and just let him create.
I mean, he scored 29 points against Old Dominion. That was a close game. He only had 10 against Goshen, but you have to take into consideration time played.
Yeah.
And it's not really it's a much different game.
He knew what the game called for when it got to Old Dominion. When it got close, he knew that he needed to be out there, which is like I think that they need someone like that really badly.
Yeah.
Because I think that the offense is going to struggle a little bit.
Especially when they lost all kinds of production from last season.
When you, especially, like when you have a walking bucket and Sparks too.
Right.
You know, whether it's at the free throw line or whether it's just a regular bucket, I think replacing that's going to be tough. So having him where they can always rely on is nice. Bench points concerned me.
I agree.
In the second game.
They had 6 bench points against Old Dominion.
And I wouldn't even call it bench points. I'd call it Zane Doughty points.
Yeah.
Like he had 6. The bench had 0.
That's a really good thing to call out, I think.
Which, I mean, I am impressed with him. First off, I'm impressed with him. He's out there making hustle plays, playing hard on defense. He's getting, you know, his time in, especially because he had to go in early in the Old Dominion game. I don't know who went in first, him or Hendricks in the game against Goshen, but he and Doughty and Hendricks looked like they were like splitting time when Jihad went out, but then Zane was in there just making it, you know, his. And
he was showing his value off the bench for sure. And it's interesting that, you know, that 5 spot I think is going to be a big concern for me defensively. They're a highly defensive team. They gave up 44 points in the paint against Old Dominion. All of them were off the dribble drive action.
Yeah.
So there's just not that person that's while Jihad is good offensively and is able to kind of be more dynamic, it's on the defensive side, and fouls could have played a part in it.
Yeah.
But it's you gotta lock down that dribble drive, because if teams are seeing that, they're gonna take advantage.
Yeah. Gotta have a rim protector.
Yeah.
Someone that you can, or, you know, funnel them away from the hoop somehow. But I mean, Jihad had that huge block in the final minute against Old Dominion, which is huge.
Yep.
And I really liked that Lewis is changing things up. He threw his zone in there in like the last minute or two.
Yeah.
And Old Dominion looked like they had absolutely no idea what they were doing. So really, really like that coaching by Lewis.
Yeah, it was a great way to, I think, switch up the looks and give your team a spark on the defensive side to turn.
I'm gonna have to resist every time to make a losing Sparks joke when you say give them a spark.
Yeah,
Sparks is gone.
It fights me internally every time I say it, because I want to make the
joke.
You
say spark, and in your head you're like.
The last thing that I want to kind of touch on is, you know, they really need to rely on the transition offense and scoring in transition, and that's something that they didn't capitalize on against Old Dominion. They had 19 turnovers against Old Dominion. They
forced 19 turnovers.
Yep, turned the ball over 19 times, and there was really no fast break transition offense from that, and they just really got to capitalize on that, especially going into conference play.
Yeah, if you're gonna be working that hard on defense, you got to turn that into points.
Yep, absolutely. You want to talk about Butler?
Yeah, Butler, like we said, 2-0. They beat Eastern Michigan, and they beat SEMA, which is Southeastern Missouri State.
Southeast Missouri State. Yep.
Yeah. They moved up in KenPom. They're 74th now. So, I mean, they're going in the right direction. But
Absolutely.
Posh Alexander, again, I thought he was going to be key for this team. I thought he was going to be, like, if he's playing well, if he's able to get himself involved or get other people involved, they're going to be pretty all right. And in the first game, he had 8 assists and 3 steals, and then in the second game he had 15 points and he went 3 for 4 from 3, which
not bad numbers.
Which is very surprising. Shooting 75% from 3,
the 1,000-point career mark.
Yes, that's right.
He's a career thousandaire.
Yeah. So I mean, looking at him and wondering if he's going to be able to shoot the 3 ball was like a big question mark for him, because he's been atrocious at shooting the 3. He's like sitting at like 20-25%.
It's funny you bring up shooting the 3 ball, because that's actually a concern of mine. Not them making, but they run a 4-guard offense primarily. They're not, in general, they're really not shooting a lot of threes from what I've seen. I think they're averaging just over 7 threes a game.
Yeah, which
is it's gonna be interesting to watch to see how that changes, because I mean, obviously guards don't have to shoot threes, right? And forwards and centers can shoot threes these days.
Someone has to, though.
But right, someone's got
to be taking those shots.
And I think that's, especially going into Big East play, they can attack the basket all they want, but Big East teams they're gonna have to score points.
Yeah.
And the last time I checked, and I'm not great at math, 3 points is worth more than 2 points.
It's generally how it works. Yeah.
right? So that's just something that I want to keep my eye on, and I'm sure that it will change a little bit as Thad Matta, a great minded coach,
Yeah.
will adjust. But that's just something that really stuck out to me.
I wonder if their thinking with that is, I mean, obviously, you play what style of fit. I mean, when you're someone like Thad Matta, you're going to play what style fits
Your
the
players.
team that you have. So I wonder
Yep.
if kind of the 4 guard thing is like, we're just going to get people who can get people set up to score, and that's how we're going to score, because they had 15 assists on 28 field goals in the second game against SEMO, which is pretty nice, and they had a decent number of points in transition. So I mean, those points in transition aren't going to really factor into that most of the time. It's going to be
Right.
someone on a breakaway.
Yeah.
But 15 on 28 is not incredible, but it's still pretty good on 15 assists for that many, field goals.
Yeah, for sure.
So I wonder if they're just trying to set everybody up, but you still got to have someone who's going to be able to make the shot,
Right. And I think that I'm like we said, it's early in the season. The offense is gonna come around. They're gonna figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a great coaching staff that's gonna kind of look at those things. They're probably looking at these numbers more than we are.
Yeah.
And are gonna adjust. A guy that really kind of is a concern of mine is Jalen Thomas. He's he's that starting center. He's the one big man that they run on. He's from the starting lineup. They've got a couple forwards and other centers that rotate in, but it's
Right.
they're getting dominated on the offensive glass.
Oh my gosh.
And
Which, I mean, you would expect with a 4 guard.
They're dominating on the defensive glass.
Yeah.
But again, when they're going into Big East play, they're really gonna have to figure out that offensive rebounding.
Yeah.
Because teams are gonna kind of run away with it. But
Yeah, that's a big question I have for them too, is how are they going to be able to rebound if they're playing 4 guards?
Right, exactly. And I think that Jalen Thomas himself is really not. He's not playing great. He's averaging about 16 minutes a game,
Mm-hmm.
but Andre Screen coming off the bench pretty much leads Thomas in every statistical category other than defensive boards and minutes played.
Yeah.
Thomas has 5 more boards, so on the defensive side, which is great. But we just talked about offensive rebounding and how important that is. And then Thomas is also averaging about 2.5 more minutes per game.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested to see how does Screen take that starting position over towards the end of the season. They've got Greg Oden as a bench coach. A notorious big man.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind that he might actually be recognizing that and putting that bug in Thad Matta's ear of, we give this guy a little bit more.
Yeah, because what's his role there?
Director of basketball operations.
Okay, so
I feel like
are they allowed to coach on the court?
bench? I don't think so.
On the court during practice, are they allowed to coach?
That I don't know actually.
Because I just wonder.
I don't.
I mean, obviously, you want someone like Greg to be working with the bigs, but I wonder what he's allowed to do.
I genuinely don't think so. I think that they're able to do they're 3 assistant coaches.
Yeah.
And then their head coach, I think, are the only ones that are able, because I think that's a big thing.
Like player development, people are allowed to be on the court, but he's a Dobo, right? You said he's a Dobo?
Yep, basketball
okay,
operations. So
yeah, I don't know. But I mean, you got him there. Utilize him somehow.
He's got an office. Thad Matta has an office that I can walk into.
Have him send some emails.
Right. Something like
yeah.
There's definitely things that whether he's able to help develop them or kind of give Thad an idea of, okay, what do these guys need to do to be better?
Yeah.
Is definitely something that I think is within reason of within the position.
Yeah. Utilizing your bigs correctly is a basketball operation, right? That's how that works.
If I was a betting man, I would say yes, but I really don't know. I don't know the intricacies of.
But I know the NCAA, so I'll say no.
Right. It took the words out of my mouth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the guard rebounding has to be there if they're gonna play those 4 guards for sure too.
Absolutely. We're talking about Evansville?
No, before we go, I don't know. Okay, so I was on the Fox Sports app looking for the Butler game, and I pulled up their Eastern Michigan stats. And Eastern Michigan, not great, obviously, but they had, I don't even know where they're pulling these numbers, because I looked on FanDuel and it had them to win, had Butler to win minus 3,000. So how betting works is if you bet $3,000, you're going to win $100.
Yep.
Right. So For some absurd reason, Fox said that the line was minus $1 million.
Got to be a typo.
Yeah, but how do you typo that bad? I was like, it was like, yeah. So if you bet
3 extra zeros.
if you bet $1 million, you would win $100. $100. So I just want to know where they're getting that from, because that was, I don't know.
They just really like Butler.
They're like,
and don't want people making money.
There's no chance anyone can make this. So whatever.
That isn't
not a bet I would make.
I'm glad that you caught that, because I hadn't seen that, and that is absolutely
You've
absurd.
never seen minus 1 million odds.
I don't think I've
minus
seen
$1 million?
minus more than like 10,000.
Yeah.
Like
No.
or in a 10,000 units, like 30,000 or 40,000.
Yeah. Unless it's like,
I've never seen anything higher than 90,000.
yeah, because you can't even bet on things like odds for Southern Indiana to, well, they're not eligible, but like odds for IUPUI to win the national championship would be like plus $1 million.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting.
Anyway, we're not a betting show, so let's move on to Evansville. They moved up in KenPom 318. They went 2-0. They played Miami, Ohio, and the St. Louis College of Pharmacy, which I had never heard of, probably because it's not a Division I school.
I had heard of it, but only because of previous jobs that I'd have.
Okay.
I interacted with students from the school when I was working in higher education.
Interesting.
So is
everyone there a pharmacist? Study
honestly,
to become a pharmacist?
I don't really know. I never really asked. I didn't care enough to ask about their degrees.
That's one where you don't want to look dumb.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's like law school, right?
Exactly. I really want to just say from the jump, I may have overreacted on Gabe Boeb.
Gabe? Is it Gabe or Gage?
Gabe.
Yeah, Boeb.
I said going into this our season preview that he's a high clip shooter from 3, and I'm kind of eating my words, because he stepped into a starter role this season.
Yeah,
and he's 1 for 9 from 3. I think he's a bench guy. Like, I think he's that guy that needs to come off the bench and hit a spot up 3. But I really think that if Evansville is going to do well in the Missouri Valley Conference, he needs to find his rhythm from 3, or move to the bench where there's maybe some less pressure for him, and he can just come in and catch and shoot.
Hear me out. Double down and say that he is the guy and that he's going to come around. He just needs to be utilized better, and just say it's a user error or something. Double down and say Boeb's the man. Don't admit you're wrong ever.
I just don't think.
Till someone comes with the receipts.
The thing is, I hope that I'm eating my words right now.
Yeah,
Gabe,
you hope that you're wrong.
Gabe, prove me wrong. All right, pop the fuck off and say this motherfucker is not real. I'm gonna hit some 3s.
You're giving him some motivation as he's like, State of Basketball podcast. Never heard of him. So they were down 2 at half.
Yep.
But
against Miami, right?
Yeah, against Miami of Ohio. Miami was shooting an absurd amount from 3. I mean,
and keep in mind they're a middle of the pack MAC team, so they're not clearing away conference winners. They just kind of exist and are content being I think they're projected to finish the MAC in 6th.
Yeah,
5th or 6th. So
yeah, and I mean they were like 50 spots higher in KenPom. Miami of Ohio was.
Yep.
So like the 270s, and Evansville's mid 300, like 330, 320 something at the beginning of the season. I really liked that their pressure in the second half, they were able to just stay in the game. And
they got Miami in a lot of foul trouble.
Yep.
Which I think, and they kind of forced 19 turnovers on, which I think turned the tide of the game for sure.
Yeah, I just lost something. Sorry. But the guy that really stood out to me in that game, because they were down going into they're down in the second half, and it looked like they were kind of dead to rights because Miami was hitting everything and Evansville was just not able to hit a single thing. So Hummerkaus was the dude that turned the tide for them.
Oh yeah, he was lights out when it mattered.
Yeah, so he was clutch, and we'll talk about him later. But Hummerkaus, I'm gonna be watching that dude pretty closely here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was last year. He was, I think, shot 35% from 3 at Huntington University. And I think in that Miami game alone, shot,
He shot, I think, 3 for 4, 3 for 5, maybe.
yeah, like over 50%.
Yeah, when it mattered too. That's the thing,
When it
because
mattered,
I mean,
it's
they were broke.
they
Like,
were
they were
clutch
broke.
shots.
But they hit some back-to-back threes to come back and had a huge comeback win against Miami.
Yep.
I was not able to catch the St. Louis College of Pharmacy game, but I mean, how much can you take from that?
The big takeaway for me
They
is
hung
that,
100, right?
yes,
Okay.
their guards leave a lot to be desired, just in general.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of their productivity came from their forwards, Yashin Toomey, and then Ben Hummerkaus. And I think that those are going to be the guys that they go to down the stretch
Mhm.
because they're just that good. I do want to point out though that like they weren't playing with Kenny Strawbridge against St. Louis Pharmacy. I think he was sick. So and
Yeah, he's
Strawbridge is one of those guys that he's a guard that, you know, I think if he was there, I wouldn't be saying that they left a lot to be desired because he's that dynamic of a guy. But with him just not being there, it's really hard to get that. Are their guards better than I think?
Yeah. You know, really great game. Really love the way that they turned that Miami game around. I'm excited to see what they have coming forward, though.
I think that that's a good example of, you know, maybe something that they feed off of the rest of the season of like, okay, we know we've done this before.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can let's turn the tide of this game and
someone
and not give up.
And someone has turned it on when it mattered the most.
Yeah, exactly. They know that they can do that. So it, you know, coming down the stretch in some of those games, it might come in handy.
Yeah. So talking about like making a comeback and winning, next up we're going to talk about Indiana, which is just plummeting in Ken Palm. They're 62 now, which is they dropped 10 points from the game that they just played against Army. So they went 2-0. They played Florida Gulf Coast down at half, and they won. They ended up winning, and they ended up beating Army too. And they were up at half by like 2, maybe.
One. I think they're up 1.
This team leaves a lot to be desired. I mean,
they do. Yeah, they do.
But so Florida Gulf Coast is a lot better than you would expect. So they're sitting 136, but Army is 327th in Ken Palm, dude.
Yeah, it was. They lost to a Division II school, I believe, that lost by like 40 to a different Division II school,
and they got smoked in both of their games against Marist and Stonehill.
Yeah, the team that they played tonight in Army was not the team that I would hope isn't the team that Army had playing against Marist and Stonehill.
I didn't catch it, but I mean, Indiana's defense has been giving up a lot of threes, and it looked like Army was like, we're not a great shooting team because they're shooting like 25%, but they were just like,
they had 35 threes.
Yeah, we're just gonna shoot. We're just gonna shoot as much as we can.
Yeah. I will say, you know, their defense, their closing out wasn't great, but in their man-to-man on their drives, like IU has had some pretty active hands on defense when in those close, you know, man-to-man positions, but they're just leaving those open threes.
It's just all the switching for them. The defensive switching has been terrible. You're getting like they're switching and they're just getting lost, and people aren't knowing where they're supposed to be.
Oh yeah, I mean, and Caleb Banks and Anthony Walker, Anthony Walker, you would imagine he's got some
played 4 years, 4 years, right?
And you know, played in the Final Four. Like he just and you know, I'm gonna give him a little bit of slack because it's a brand new defense, it's a brand new team for him, but he just didn't look comfortable. He was getting lost. He was, you know, turning the ball over. There's a lot of defensive miscues. It was just not great, and
they looked horrible.
Yeah,
in both.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I
mean,
like, they're almost liabilities at this point to be on the court, which sucks because we hope they have talent and can contribute, but if they're not able to be on the court, it really impacts the starters because the starters are getting tired because they're working.
Indiana doesn't have a deep enough bench at the 3 spot to be having Mackenzie Mbako struggling, to be having CJ Gunn struggling, to be having Caleb Banks struggling, and Anthony Walker, like that just.
Yeah, I mean, Mbako, he looks like a freshman, which you would expect because, you know, he is a freshman, but he was a top 10 guy. He was a projected first round pick. He's a top 3 all time, a top 5 all time, depending on who you ask, IU basketball recruit.
Yeah.
And it's, there's potential there. It's just we're not seeing it. And the team, Mike Woodson's not seeing it. I mean, when it came down to it, final stretch of the game and both their game against Florida Gulf Coast.
He wasn't in there.
He wasn't in there. It was Gabe Cupps.
Yeah.
And I mean, Gabe Cupps the dude's a dog. I think that he's starter talent coming off the bench.
Yeah.
And, he's a guy, he's an absolute workhorse. Against Florida Gulf Coast, he had a 4:30 a.m. workout before the team's 6 a.m. workout.
Yeah.
And
this
then
is every day, basically.
That same night, he came in and just absolutely balled his heart out. Stat line doesn't reflect it, but the man's impact is just
I mean, in this game against Army, Mackenzie Mbako played 16 minutes, had 2 points on 1 of 2 shooting, and was just a non-factor. I mean, he was benched for most of the second half. He was out there running with Cupps in the end of both games. CJ Gunn had 0. It's the thing that stands out to me is like Xavier Johnson was who he was getting upset as he does. He's a very emotional player, but he was scoring as like we thought Indiana needed him to.
Yep.
And that was nice to see. Malik Renew kind of came through, but the dude who really shined for me in both of the games was Ware.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he had his first double-double in the first game against Florida Gulf Coast.
First career double-double,
Yeah.
not of the season.
Yeah.
Obviously first of the season, but it's his first career double-double.
Both. And then he had 20, his career high
Yep.
in the game against Army. So,
and that's, I mean, he's a guy that's playing with a chip on his shoulder because everyone said going into the season that, he's got motor issues.
yeah.
I don't see that. When I'm looking at him, I don't see a guy who has motor issues because he's working his ass off. I mean, he had 3 blocks against Florida Gulf Coast, and they were like, I thought he was a spiker on a volleyball team the way he was blocking those. Like he was just getting up and just slamming those things down.
Yeah, you got to hope that, I mean, Indiana fans have to hope that like they figure out this switching and their perimeter defense for the amount of threes that people are going to take, because you've got a 7-foot rim protector down low who's going to be there. So a lot of people aren't going to be driving on you in the first place, and they know he can guard in space. So they're not going to be trying to get him into a bunch of switches because they know he can guard in space. So if they want to figure this out, they need to really figure out how to stop people from shooting the 3.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, the teams have been shooting a lot of threes on them, but they're still getting dominated on the offensive glass. I didn't see the breakdowns from tonight's game, but against Florida Gulf Coast, it was just insane.
Yeah, and so offensive rebounds tonight, Indiana had 5 and Army had 11, which is pretty typical when you see a team shooting a lot of threes, because a lot of threes usually call for long rebounds.
That's true.
So if you're not driving the ball, it's typically not going to be, a close rebound that your big's going to pick up. It's going to be a ball that clangs off the rim, shoots, 25 feet out, and their guards are all there. So
yeah,
I'm not too concerned about that. I mean, if you look at the stat line, IU shot 36% from 3 and 81% from the free throw line. So you're like, great, they had made 18 to 22 of their free throws. Of course, Army only shot 9. They only made 3, but they shot 34% from 3. You're like, oh wow, they shot worse. Well, they shot 38 and they made 13. Yeah. They made more than IU even attempted.
That's a concern.
Yeah, IU needs to be shooting more. They need to be guarding the 3 better, which is exactly why. I mean, when you're down against a team ranked in the 300s for most of the game, that's why we have you 4th, and we're probably being generous.
I agree. I definitely think that we're being generous with that pick, but I think we were just considering the potential that team has.
Yeah.
And rather than actually,
I mean, we said it last week. We think they're a March team. They just have to make it to March.
Yep.
They can make it to March. They should be okay. Trusting the coach and everything, but
yep.
I don't want to talk about them anymore.
Nope. Indiana State, they went 1-1.
Mm-hmm.
They won against St. Mary of the Woods. An impressive day. They kind of blew St. Mary of the Woods out of the water.
But again, not a D1 school.
Right, so, exactly. Lost to Bama, but that loss was, I consider, that's a good loss, because they were competitive for 30 minutes.
It was
of
like
that game.
30 minutes where Bama had them. Bama was up by like 10 or so, but they just never put them away.
And I think it was a 20-point loss, maybe
22.
And that's a lot of that came down in the final few minutes when Indiana State was just fouling a lot to try and generate some momentum and decrease the number of points that Bama was scoring, so they could get the ball, keep the clock stopped, get the ball back, and try and score. So I do think that it's a little bit skewed down the stretch, but also Bama's a team that they're probably much more well conditioned.
Yeah.
They've got a deeper bench that their bench guys can probably keep up with Indiana State starters. So I do think some fatigue probably.
Yeah.
And when the starters were when Indiana State in general was working as hard as they were early on in the game, that's going to impact the end of the game. But
yeah,
it's it was an impressive game because that Bama team's they're no joke. I think they're a really talented team.
Bama teams are always great because they play really nice NBA offense. They are going to shoot a lot of threes, and they just got athletic dudes. I mean, the SEC is full of just athletic dudes, and Josh Schertz's team went down there and was able to compete for 30 minutes, which against a top 25 team.
Oh yeah.
And that to me, I don't think I was not expecting them to win the game. I honestly wasn't expecting it to be that competitive.
I didn't think it'd be that competitive.
The final score is about maybe what I thought it was going to be, similar, but I didn't expect Swope to absolutely go nuts. I didn't expect them to shoot like crazy until they didn't. I think that they were just playing hot, like you were saying, and then it kind of came back on them.
And like looking at that 22-point loss, I mean, Bama took 11 more shots. They made 6 more than Indiana State, so that's going to make a difference. They were at the free throw line a lot more, obviously, because at the end of the game there was some fouling. Bama just dominated the offensive glass. They had 14 offensive rebounds, 18 second chance points, and take those things out. That's a close game. If you get maybe 3 or 4 more defensive boards, we might be talking a low teens game. I think Josh Schertz and they said it in the broadcast. Nate Oates and Josh Schertz both said each other are coach, like they're geniuses.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're incredibly good coaches. And even after the game, like Nate Oates sprinted up to Schertz and they talked and they joked. They gave a little like shoulder taps, like joking after the game, which I think was it's gain respect game type thing. When it's
you don't win that, you don't win as many games as Schertz by accident.
Exactly.
Doesn't matter what level, but I mean when you're playing a team that like Alabama that goes 56% from 3 and they shoot 23 of them.
Yep.
Like that, it's hard to lose when you shoot that well. I mean, Indiana State shot a really respectable 10 of 26, 38%. That's great. You had Swope 4 of 6, Conwell 4 of 8. The one guy for me, 5 assists, 0 points was Xavier Bledson. Pass first point guard, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Swope being.
He only attempted 2 threes for Bledson. Only 2 shots.
Hey, I mean he's, he knows his role.
He knows where to get the ball.
And so you mentioned Swope as a guy you're kind of watching. Ryan Conwell, who you mentioned was 4 for 8 from 3 against Bama, is a guy that I'm really keeping my eyes on. He gets 5 for 8 from 3 against St. Mary of the Woods. He had 7 boards, 3 assists. He played 31 minutes. He was 4 for 8 from 3. He had 10 boards.
Yeah.
And 29 minutes against Bama. Like dude can shoot. Like Swope is going to score the ball at all 3 levels. But Conwell, like he's more of a spot up guy. I think that he is a guy that I'm excited to watch.
Yeah.
And really see how that pans out, because 4 for 8 for 3 from against a team like Bama, that's impressive. Like 5 for 8 against St. Mary of the Woods, like okay, it's St. Mary of the Woods.
5 for 8, but he had 20. Had 25 against St. Mary of the Woods.
Right. If you're shooting 50% from 3 against a team like Bama, like I expect that to kind of translate as the season goes on.
And Schertz is definitely the type of guy that they went in there. They competed against Bama, and you could tell that the team was not scared at all. Like they were ready to play. They were ready. They didn't care whose name was on the
Bama
jersey.
And they're playing in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah,
which I think is a very like intimidating place to play any game.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah, but I mean,
it
NATO
was
has
exciting to
had
see.
great Bama teams, and
Absolutely.
this one's no exception. But they went in there, and I think they honestly raised my expectations. Not my expectations, but they kind of. I think that they're maybe able to win the MVC. Like, I would really be watching for them. I know. I think I said last time, they might be able to contend. I think they're definitely a contender. We'll see when they get to playing, conference games. But I think that they. No Indiana bias, but I think that they're my pick to win the MVC.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's talk about IUPUI.
Yep.
They're
Kicked off the season for everybody.
They kicked off the season for
Against
everyone.
Spalding.
They're at 302 according to KenPom. They're so close from last season being the last team in NCAA according to KenPom. Now they're scraping breaking 300.
Yeah,
which is only 61 spots up, but breaking 300 from going
it's
to
a
last
huge
place,
jump,
I think
dude.
is a huge jump. The couple concerns that I have is one, I can't really get a good read on this team. Like, they're gritty and they fight until the end, but it's going from playing Spalding to then playing Valpo. It's just interesting to see how different, like, certain players show up one day, other players show up another day. They shot 17.6 from 3 against Spalding.
They cannot shoot. Like, I'm certain of that.
They shot
shoot.
better against Valpo, well, a whopping 33%. But they won the game against Spalding at the free throw line. They shot 17. They made 17 free throws, which is based on playing a close game. It was a 7-point game.
Yeah,
and they made 6 more free throws than Spalding made. So they won the game at the line because they clearly weren't doing it from 3.
Yeah, I mean, you learn a lot from close games. Doesn't matter if it's Spalding, it doesn't matter if it's Valpo. I mean, they've had 2 close games, and you're going to learn a lot about your guys.
Exactly. They're consistently scoring in the paint. They're averaging about 35 points in the paint, and also 15.5 points off turnovers. That's not scoring off a turnover is key.
Yeah,
I think that's a super important thing. So as long as they keep it up, and their bench is averaging about 27 points per game, so their bench is, that's part of it. It's like, okay, like, is their bench better than their starters? Is that? I mean, that's a good thing. Their bench is putting up that many points.
Trying to nail down lineups and whatnot.
Yeah.
Bryce Monroe in the Valpo game really came through. It was Valpo was up going into half. Valpo had a lead into the middle of the second half, and then Bryce Monroe comes out. He goes back to back buckets and gives them the lead. He ended up with 20. And when he gave them the lead, I don't think they ever trailed after that. They finished the game, and I don't remember how much they won by, but more than 6, I think.
It won by 10, I believe.
Yeah.
Valpo.
So
it was 71, 61.
Something like that. So the thing for me is Valpo also couldn't really shoot either.
Right.
They were struggling to shoot the ball.
It was a depressing game to watch, I'd say, from my end. I struggled, staying locked into it because it was just
so many missed shots.
I mean, it was 25-24 and like at halftime damn near. Like, there just was not a lot of scoring.
It was tough because I think both teams are going to struggle, but I think neither team quit. Neither team quit, and I think one of the reasons why IUPUI was able to pull away and win that game is because they were hitting threes down the stretch.
Yep.
With Bryce Monroe hitting some shots, but Jackson Edwards got ejected. I don't know what in the world happened.
Yeah, that was a weird. It was a double technical.
It was a double technical, but
the one guy got ejected.
Edwards got ejected,
and Jalen Counter fouled out.
Jalen Counter got his 5th foul. So, like, Jackson Edwards, I think, was Valpo's leading scorer at that point.
I think that sounds right.
And so he was out. So it was just really weird.
And it was like in the last 4 minutes of the game, the last 2 minutes, I think.
But I mean, they ended up hitting their shots in the end, and that's what won them the game. So I like that they didn't quit. I mean, I think when you return a lot of the roster, a lot of the points, and they've been through the worst. So it's probably hard to like really crush them. So seeing them win is just nice, even though an Indiana team did have to take a loss in that game.
Yep.
A tough one next is Notre Dame.
Well, you mentioned that neither of those teams quit. They played the full 40 minutes, and I think that Notre Dame they're the same way. They're 1-1,
Yeah.
and I kind of said it before, like they didn't quit in either of those games. So it's and I don't want to talk about a few other things after this, but it's interesting that against Niagara, they trailed for 25 minutes of that game.
Yeah.
Shrews was able to find a way to pull it off. Against Western Carolina, they lost by 10, but they were down upwards of 17 at one point, and they trailed for 38 minutes.
Yeah.
They're playing from behind a lot, but they're keeping the games close. They're fighting, and I think a lot of that has to do with some of their players is I think Shrews is built for Notre Dame. I think that just seeing him there in that arena, like he's getting the crowd hyped up. He's really advocating for his play. They made the joke in the broadcast that Shrews has become best friends with the refs, and it was very snarky best friends. If he's getting in the refs, not in their faces.
He knows how to work them.
He's if he sees a bad call and the refs make a bad call, like he's not afraid to go up to that ref and be like, "Yo, figure it out."
He knows ball, and they know he knows ball.
He knows ball.
Just the thing, I think, he's going to do well there. I think that this season is going to take time.
Yeah, I agree.
But he was accountable after their loss. Like he was like, that's on me.
Yep.
Which, some coaches don't have that hubris to say that. They're like, we had to play, we got out rebounded or whatever. He's like, nah, that was on me, guys. Like, sorry.
Yeah. A couple things I want to point out. There's a couple players that really stood out to me. No shock. First name I'm going to say, Marcus Burton.
Yeah,
the dude's great. The truth. He can take over a game when the opportunity's there. We saw that against Niagara. He also did that a little bit against Western Carolina. He ran into some foul trouble against Western Carolina, so that made a big impact. And he wasn't playing defense towards the end of the game to limit those fouls, but they were fouling, getting the guys on the free throw line. Burton was subbing in to take over the offense, but he had 29 points against Niagara, and that's a freshman record for their debut at Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
And take a guess at what year you think that record was set.
Oh my gosh, I think I saw this and I just can't remember. Is it 80s?
1988, Fonzo Ellis. Not a bad guy to be compared to. That's so the dude can ball. He had 17 against Western Carolina, so he's already dang near 50 points in his first two games. So that's nothing to shy away from.
And I think he's going to have a really long leash with Burton because he doesn't have. He's got to have someone that can score for him.
Yep.
He's got to have someone, that he can just give the ball to and be like, make something happen, or we're going to get the ball to you. Here's the action. Let it go.
Yeah.
So he's going to be able to flourish there for Shrewsbury too. And if he sticks around, which I assume he will, because he didn't leave when the coaching change happened, he's going to be great there.
Yep. And another guy that really impressed me against Western Carolina was Julian Roper. He played 35 minutes. He's a starter. And when he wasn't on the court, Notre Dame felt it.
Yeah.
He whenever he came sub back in, he'd hit a couple big threes, and really the energy was there. And I think that's a great trait for a guy that you want in your starting offense, especially when you got him standing next to Marcus Burton.
Yeah.
And it was really fun to watch. Like you just hearing his name called play after play when they were down, and he was a big reason why they made a comeback to keep it close.
Mm-hmm.
It was exciting. And then there's Kerry Booth, absolute animal off the bench. He was their second leading scorer against Niagara. He led, I think, their scoring against Western Carolina with 20.
Okay.
He was 6 for 12 from the field and 4 for 8 from 3. So a pure 50% shooter. You'd like to see the other field goals up, but he only took 4 extra field goals or 4 extra shots inside the arc. So nothing I'm super concerned about there, but he was an absolute microwave. Like when he got hot, and he couldn't miss. He was another guy that hit several back-to-back threes that was like picking the ball up to him like it was an automatic bucket. It felt like, especially when they needed it. So
Schurz will be able to find him where he wants him to be.
Yeah, and it's what's interesting to me too is Niagara. They started with in KenPom 165.
Okay.
Western Carolina was 167.
Okay.
So
very similar teams.
It's very similar, but they like you win against Niagara barely, and then you lose by 10 to Western Carolina. So I mean, in theory, that should put Notre Dame. I don't really know because you lost to the lower ranked team. You beat the higher ranked team. So like, what does that say?
You'd think that would even out or something.
You think that would even out, but that kind of intrigued me because usually teams this early in the season aren't playing bye games that are, I don't even call this a bye game really.
Yeah, I mean, in a normal year,
technically it's not a bye game because Notre Dame's it was a bye game because Notre Dame played at home, but those teams were higher ranked teams than them. So it's just
wait. No, Niagara.
Did I have that backwards?
Niagara is 305 in KenPom. Western Carolina is 147 in KenPom.
What did I see?
You were looking at Notre Dame's ranking.
I'm an idiot. That makes a lot more sense then.
Which is
okay. That's a little worse.
Which is why they went down after beating Niagara, but they went down a lot losing to Western Carolina, which I think is interesting.
Yeah. Okay, that's my bad. I take it back everything I said.
No, it's fine. I was looking at that earlier. I was confused. Not your numbers, but the KenPom numbers, and was like, okay, how do I decipher this? You need a manual for that website sometimes.
I don't understand half of it because there's just so much, and it's just like my small brain does not compute. But you know what does compute? PFW and Dubs.
Dude, they're 3-0. They played Andrews, which is non-D1. They went and scored 130.
Yep.
And Andrews scored 9 points in the second half. 9. That's absurd, dude. They went into DePaul.
Like
first game of the season.
Like you said.
Yes.
We
called our shot.
That was your upset
shot and said that PFW is going to go in and beat DePaul. And they did it. And they looked really good while they did it. Now, I have to admit, DePaul is like really bad. Like really bad. But DePaul also lost to Long Beach State. So still a
I'm not going to discredit that win.
Still a Power 6 win.
I'm not gonna discredit any part of that win because they fought and they won.
Today they went in and they
in Chicago.
Yes, today they went in and beat Texas A&M Commerce, and I was in attendance for that game, and it was awesome. I mean, they played in the Coliseum, which is they play in one of two venues. They either play in Hilliard Gates or they play in the Memorial Coliseum. Coliseum's just big. I talked about this. I think
it's a semi-pro. It's an arena where semi-pro hockey's played.
Yeah,
where G League.
Yeah, the G League. Pacers G League team used to play. It's there, so. But it's a big thing, a big arena. I mean, the lower deck was very empty, but there were a couple hundred people there. And I brought my daughter and my wife, and my daughter was loving the Mastodon. Like, that was her highlight, was the Mastodon mascot. He didn't come close enough, which kind of stunk. But the team, we were worried about how they're gonna gel. I mean, they're cooking already. Like they're firing. Like they've been playing together for a while, which I did not expect. I'm pleasantly surprised to see them playing so well together, and they're just playing like really good team basketball. So Jalen Jackson, like
I said, he
balled out in game one.
He had 13 against DePaul. He ran into some foul trouble. He only played 27 minutes.
Yeah, he had some more foul trouble in the game against Commerce too.
He played 19 minutes against Andrews, had 21 points at home. A guy, like I said, he's going to play well in front of that home crowd in his home city. And I really think that showed. He was 9 for 12 from the field with 3 for 5 from 3. Mm-hmm. So that's an impressive rate. And only, on the season ahead of today's game, only their big had one more board, had more boards than him with one. The dude's a workhorse, and I think that he's I'm glad that he's balling out like he is, because that's going to give him a spark and keep them in games.
Yeah.
Especially, I think they're going to finish well above where they're projected at 8th in the Horizon League.
I think so too. And like Bello today, he had 29 points. I think he had 19 at halftime. I mean, he was just hitting everything, and they're just sharing the ball so well. They were turning A&M Commerce over just constantly. I don't know how many turnovers they had. A&M Commerce had 17 turnovers, and you could tell DFW only had 6. So they're playing pretty clean basketball.
Yep.
And I mean, I was just impressed with just how good they looked. Like, there's a reason we have them at number 2 on our power rankings.
Oh, yeah.
They just looked really nice. The atmosphere was pretty good. We sat in like row 4, so we were like 2 rows behind the media, and favored by 5 against A&M Commerce, but they won by 22. I mean, it was never in doubt. They got out, jumped out to an early lead, and just never let them get closer than, I think, like 15.
For sure. And I think that, you're mentioning turnovers and the turnover differential there. What's really cool to see, or not, I wouldn't say cool, it's exciting to see in their first 2 games against Andrews, DePaul and Andrews. Yeah. They forced 22 turnovers against DePaul, and then 29 turnovers against Andrews.
Yeah. And then 17 in game 3. I mean, that's a lot.
That's incredible. I think that's leading to a lot of scoring on the offensive side, because their team plays with a lot of pace.
They'll get out and run.
They play fast. And I love a team that plays fast. That's like my favorite thing in a basketball team, and it's awesome to see that they're gelling so well.
Yeah,
early in the season.
I like the team. I want to see them more in person.
Yep.
I want to see them at Hilliard Gates, because I want to see if the environment's a little bit better, because I think that it can be, it can be a little bit detrimental to have the Coliseum be so empty.
Yeah.
When you could have you could have more fans
And
packed in.
I looked it up. I think it's about a 50-50 split still this season, where they play at the Coliseum versus play at the Gates Center. But I saw a game. We both saw a game last year. They played IUPUI at the Gates Center.
Yeah.
And it was like a snowstorm almost. There was like a foot of snow. The ground, the roads were pretty slippery.
Yeah, we shouldn't have gone.
Probably shouldn't have gone. There was still a decent amount of students there.
Yeah.
Like it was, I'd say that was that their entire kind of section that's allotted to them, from the students' perspective, was pretty packed, and you really felt their student section's presence. And I think that's something that they definitely miss in the Coliseum.
Yeah, I think that when you look at their games coming up, they've got Northern Arizona, who's 262 in KenPom. I think they should win that, and I think that they've got a chance against San Francisco. So I think if they come back and we're talking about them in a week after they just played Northern Arizona, San Francisco, and then Wittenberg, who's non-D1, if they're still haven't taken a loss, like that. It's almost what I expect them to do.
Yeah.
I expect them to go in and come back, playing home against Green Bay and be playing to stay undefeated.
Yep.
I like this team, man. I like how they play, and I like John Kaufman. He's really got them working.
Yeah.
And they're working really well.
For sure.
So Purdue Fort Wayne, let's talk about Purdue.
Yeah.
Again, not a ton to talk about in terms of like different than expectations. They're still 1 in KenPom. They went 2-0 as expected.
Yep.
Samford and Morehead State were their 2 wins. If you had eyes on the Samford game, like we recommended, you got to see the dude from Samford.
Dallas
Graziani. The picture is so incredible of the jump ball, because they let him do it. He's like 5'8". He didn't even we were watching it.
Did he?
No,
but they almost won the tip.
Yeah, they almost won the tip, but that's what my wife pointed out too, because she was like, he didn't even jump, and I was like, he couldn't reach it.
Yeah,
he wasn't ready to jump.
And Edie could just stand there and get it. But Sanford almost won the tip, and I think that's absolutely comical because they fought for it after Edie went up for the tip, and Dallas like sprinted to the side of him to go where he tipped the ball
just
to.
Which is genius.
Which I imagine was part of the game plan.
Yeah. I liked that a lot, but before we get into talking about the two games that they had, so on KenPom, Purdue is projected to win every single game on their schedule.
Yep.
Every single game. This does not include the back two games in Maui because they don't know who they're going to play yet, so they don't have a percentage chance to win. So Purdue is projected to win every single one of those games.
Okay.
So higher than 50% chance to win them all, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the lowest percent chance to win they have is?
I imagine it's probably like Gonzaga, and it's probably like 72%.
It is Gonzaga in Maui, which makes sense. 58% is their lowest chance to win.
Okay,
So that's insane.
Yeah.
Like obviously, the way statistics work, they're favored in all of their games, but they're not projected to finish undefeated.
Right. That's just you just can't.
But that's just insane to me. Thought they looked fine. Shot a crap ton of threes in the game against Samford.
Yeah, they were 55% from three, by the way.
Yeah.
They were four. Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer both had 4 threes.
Yeah, so you're like, oh, like did they fix their problem? And then they come around in the next game and they shot
34%.
Which is still really good.
Right.
Which is still like right where you want to be.
And it didn't really matter against Moorhead because they just like they were going to win anyway. My concern is the consistency that they have from three, which is I think a concern that's a national concern, and we saw it last year as well. I mean, Smith and Lawyer, like I said, they had 4 each. However, against Moorhead, they were combined 1 for 6.
Yeah.
So Lance Jones picked up the slack, which I think is really a big expectation. They need him to do that. He was 0 for 4 against Samford.
Yeah.
So it's when Fletcher and Braden are hitting.
Yeah.
Lance Jones isn't. When they aren't hitting, Lance Jones is because he was 3 for 6 against Moorhead.
Yeah.
So
you just had just last year you had a lot of the times where like literally everyone was broke.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like everyone was shooting bricks, and they were shooting like 20%. You're like, what happened?
Exactly.
And
no, I agree.
I think that they've got more. I think they're more capable to not do that this year.
Yep.
I think Braden is more willing to shoot too.
And speaking of Braden, he was, in case you missed it, he was 2 boards away from a triple-double. He had 11 points, 11 assists, 8 rebounds. He also tied Edie that game in rebounds. They both had 8. Which,
hey man, if I were Edie, I'd be taking some off. I'd be taking some time off.
Yeah.
But that was only going to be that would have only been their second triple-double ever, which is nuts.
Yeah, I mean, Indiana only has 3.
Yeah, and 4. two of them are in the last decade, and I was there for one of them.
I definitely think that they're. I mean, you can't really. There's not much to say. Everyone knows it.
Yeah.
I will reaffirm what everyone has said. Colvin is as athletic as people are saying. He missed it, but he had a dirty oop chance for a dunk against Samford. It was a bad pass. It was kind of low, and he pretty much caught it at the guy's head after he's already in the air, and then had to try to bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a hard. You're going down from your waist up, trying to while catching it, jumping, moving, flying, trying to dunk. Missed it, but it was it. If that hit, I think the roof would have fallen down.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I like the team though.
I will. Another thing I want. My concern is Trey Kaufman-Renn.
Okay.
He's playing the 4 next to Edie. He really just kind of seems like he's just there. Like nothing stood out as positive or negative. And is he the new Ethan Morton? Are they just bound to have their 5th player in that lineup just kind of exist, make a play here or there, but not really impact the game in a positive or negative way? I don't know. Is that just a curse that they have? It
Well, I mean, I hope not. But who's playing behind him? They had Caleb first.
Caleb first and
He had 5. Not incredible. Mason Gillis had 8.
right. Like it's just Mason Gillis hit a couple big threes against Morehead State. I think he was 2 for 2 from 3.
2.
It's really just like I don't know. I don't know what to expect from Trey Kaufman-Renn.
Yeah.
Obviously, Painter sees something in him.
I think you got to. I don't know. I wouldn't be too quick because they've got to learn how to play together.
Yeah, and I do think that, but I just would expect that like these are the games that we see more out of Trey. But I don't know. I'm, and this is not me dogging on him in any capacity because he's a great. I mean, he was an Indiana Master Basketball.
You're a Trey Kaufman-Renn hater on record.
Those words were never said.
I could feel it.
I said, is he the new Ethan Morton? Ethan Morton is an all-team glue guy. That's been coined by Painter. So to me, I live. I love a glue guy. So if that's his role, fuck yeah. if it's not his role, I don't know.
I mean, that's not the role that they want him to have. Is the thing.
I don't know. This is just me being confused. What I'm not confused about is that Southern Indiana didn't win a game this week.
That sucks.
It is. You just hate to see it. Like we're sitting here, we want to talk positively and be not critical of all these teams, but it's really hard when you look at a team they just couldn't get over the hump.
They are though. The reason why they went so they should have been at best 1 and 2.
1 and 2, yep.
1 and 2 is like
they're playing a good St. Louis team.
Yeah.
They played
maybe
a great Michigan State team.
They're playing a good St. Louis team and they're playing a Michigan State team. So they're playing Michigan State and St. Louis. So they're participating. They're going into these environments and they're playing these tough teams.
They played competitively against Michigan State.
Yes,
they have fight in them. That's for sure.
Okay, and then they played Chicago State, and the closest one like throughout was the St. Louis game.
Yep, they lost by 12.
Yeah, and then after that, the Chicago State game, Chicago State was just so athletic, and they were just nailing threes. Like it felt like I was watching Army playing out there because they were just threes, just firing off threes. But I mean, they were so athletic, and the announcers were even talking about that Chicago State is like a man only defense, and they had to be thrown. They were throwing out so much zone in the second half just to try and stop them because they could not stop them from scoring. It was rough, but they ended up coming back in the game, and a big key in the first part of why they were down was turnovers. They had like 6 turnovers in the first 10 minutes. They had a crap ton of turnovers, but they got it was like they were down 22, 23. They got it down to 10 at like the 9-minute mark. They used that zone. They got it to like a 7-point game, but they just couldn't finish it. They couldn't close the gap, which stunk because as soon as they started coming back, I was like, okay, like they're going to do it. But no, unfortunately, they couldn't pull it off.
I mean, I think scoring is my biggest concern. Is they have one guy averaging double digits. I know it's early in the season, so you'd hope that you have several guys averaging double digits because of how early it is. They're shooting just under 37% from the field. They're averaging 57 points per game. That's not going to win them games,
dude.
It went up a little bit because they scored a little bit more than that against Chicago State.
I can't say this other than they cannot shoot. They cannot shoot. Like Chicago State was able to pop off because they were hitting threes. When they played Michigan State, I was watching it and I was like, oh my gosh, they're in this. And then I kept watching it and I was like, they are not scoring. Neither team is scoring. They were stopping Michigan State every time, but they went 1 for 18 to start the game.
Yeah.
So they were in it for like the first half.
The first 10 minutes. They were in it defensively,
They could not throw
But
the
they-
ball in the ocean.
Yeah, they just couldn't score. Like I think if they score, it puts pressure on Michigan State, and that's
Yeah, I mean, if
maybe they lose by less than 23.
well, they got it
but-
down. So they went on like a 12-0 run in the
Yep.
second half against Michigan State, and they cut the lead to 15. But okay, if they're down 15 at that point, if they were able to make anything in the first half to start the game, they had literally like I think 4 points because they hit some free throws and
Yeah.
then one shot in like 4 or 6, and they were stuck there for an eternity,
Yeah.
like forever. And I was just sitting there the whole time like something has to go in. Like there's no way that they can miss this many, and they just kept missing.
Yeah, I think that it's and it's interesting because like so Jack Milkey and Jordan Tillman are kind of the two guys that I'm watching. The Milkey, his stats went up in about almost every category from last season. 3 games into the season, he's shooting about 40% from 3.
Yeah.
But like he also didn't start against Michigan State or Chicago State,
Uh-huh.
which I don't really get. Like, why was he starting the first game against St. Louis, but not the others? Who knows what's going on behind the scenes, but like, if you've got one guy scoring in double digits, I believe it's Jordan Tillman with about 12.5. You need more. Just need more. You gotta be able to shoot.
Someone's got to be able to
They
score,
need to
dude.
get in the gym and just only shoot.
Yeah.
Like,
Dude, it's shooting, it's layups, it's everything. It's
Yeah.
just I don't know
Yeah,
what
it's-
I don't know what curse someone put
they
on
need
this
to
team.
know how to score. They need to just see the ball
Yeah.
go through the hoop
Yeah,
about a million times before they put next game.
They need to take during one of the TV timeouts. They need to bust out the ball rack, and they just need to have some people get some shots.
Which
up.
I actually don't think is allowed.
It's not.
We talked about it
We
pretty
talked-
heavily,
yeah,
like
yeah.
and in our own personal lives. But it's
It's not allowed. But
That's what they need.
what are they going to give you? A technical? Take the technical. Take the technical. Have your dudes out there getting some shots up.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, tough. They were actually favored by 5 against Chicago State. Chicago State is, I think, in a similar spot in KenPom, like in the low 300s. But they just couldn't pull it off, man. And I wish they would have.
Yeah, for
But-
sure.
Let's jump into our final team. So I want to talk about Valparaiso.
Yep.
They went 1-1.
The number 335 according to KenPom.
yeah,
which
went
is
down.
They went down, but they did take the loss to IUPUI. So
So they beat Trinity Christian, not a Division I team.
Nope.
And they lost to IUPUI. So that was one of our games where someone had to lose, but you know, they played well, and I thought that they were going to pull it off. They took that lead into halftime,
Mhm.
and they were leading for a good portion of it. Had that whatever the heck he said got ejected in the
Yeah.
second half.
yeah, it was
Jackson Stafford got ejected, and then that's when Counter went out with 5 fouls.
Mhm.
But just like Southern Indiana, this team also cannot shoot. 10%, went 2 of 19.
Yep.
Rough.
Yeah, it was. And they went 19 for 60 from the field.
Yeah, can't shoot like anywhere.
I will say that, but it's interesting because that's such a big difference from their game against Trinity. Because I mean, Isaiah Stafford and Jahari Williamson, they combined for 9 threes on a team 48% from deep against Trinity. But then they go in against probably a better team, obviously, a more competitive environment, and shoot 10%. Like that's concerning.
I like IUPUI's ball pressure, though. I like the way that they play defense. And I
yeah.
think that probably had a big part, to play.
I really think that if this is any indication of their season, they're going to struggle in the Missouri Valley Conference because they're going to see a lot.
I mean,
of
we
that.
just talked about Indiana State
Yeah.
going in and potentially winning and playing really well against, Bama,
Yeah.
and they're going to have to play that same team.
And I mean, Jahari Williamson, he was tied in scoring with 16. He's a freshman.
Mhm.
Mind you, we talked about they have 5 freshmen. 4 came from prep schools. 1 did not.
He's
the one that did not. So that was interesting to me.
He heard you was talking.
Exactly. Which, hey, my man, keep it up. but he did not play well against IUPUI, and I think that could be because it's a more competitive team. It's an older team, so he's being a true freshman. He only played 6 minutes, so he played a lot more against Trinity, and 14 more minutes. Mm-hmm. So that is going to make a difference in your scoring. But
I thought that in Trinity they looked like a defense first team. Yeah. For most of it, and it was just hard to tell what they were doing against IUPUI. But
yeah, for sure,
it was tough for sure. But hopefully they can bounce back.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of ball to be played.
Yeah,
a lot of ball to be played.
Now I actually want to. It's probably my favorite part of the show. This is where we're going to talk about our Jimmy Chitwood Player of the Week.
New segment. We didn't do it last week because obviously games hadn't been played. But I definitely I know how excited you are for this. So let's.
I mean,
who's your guy?
Jimmy Chitwood, just legend. If you've seen Hoosiers, you know Jimmy Chitwood.
You know the name.
I'm not going to describe him to you. I'm not going to give you the rundown. If you hear the name, you know. Obvious choice is Ben Hummerkaus. He from Evansville. He played 36 in their game against, I can't even remember who it was, Miami of Ohio.
Okay.
So he had 18 points, 8 rebounds, and 3 assists. They were down by 2 with 9:30 left in the second half. I cannot stress this hard enough. He breaks this dude's ankles. Just snaps him in half, step back 3. And then, so they take the lead. Next one, he hits another 3. So they go up 4. Then he forces a turnaround mid-range right after that. And I'm like, I love this guy. He is he's the guy. Yeah, so he scored 8 straight, 6:20 left. Hits another 3. And I'm like, oh my God, this dude can't miss. He blocked a shot, then blocked a shot after that. And he just literally by himself brought the team back, gave him the lead, and they never lost it.
He's got that dog in him.
Yeah.
He got that dog in him.
He came around and he saw the team needed it. And he was like, watch this.
Yeah.
Saw that dude's ankles, just turned to matchsticks. Yeah. And was like, all right, my time.
Yep.
So Jimmy Chitwood, Player of the Week this week. Ben Hummerkaus. I mean, I love what I saw.
If you guys disagree, you saw something else, let us know in the comments who your Jimmy Chitwood Player of the Week is. Because we're like I said, we can't watch every game. We might miss a couple plays here and there. But if you saw something from any school, let us know.
Might not be the guy who had the most, but you'll know when you see the Jimmy Chitwood Player of the Week. You just saw the Jimmy Chitwood Player of the Week.
And if there's any nominations, we'll bring them up next week's episode and really talk about them and see how they might compare to Hummerkaus. But it's gonna be tough to beat this week.
All right, let's move on to games we need to be aware of next week.
Yep. So there's a couple games I want to point out. Is we've got 2, I believe, in-state matchups. We've got Indiana State playing at home against IUPUI. So IUPUI is going into Terre Haute. And then we've also got Ball State going to Evansville, which is, you really hate to see an in-state matchup this early in the season. But I think it gives us a good baseline. It helps us with our power rankings for sure. But Indiana State, they're 13-point favorites. So not really shocked there, kind of based on what we've talked about and how good of a team Indiana State has the potential to be, and they're showing us. And then Ball State is a 3-point favorites against Evansville. So that also doesn't surprise me. I think that Evansville and Ball State are both great teams. So seeing that game, I think it's going to be a much more closely fought game. And I think that I think that game could legitimately go either way.
Yeah.
So it's going to be fun to see how that plays out.
Yeah.
Any other games that?
Yes, I've got a couple here. So, Evansville's going to SEMO. We just saw Butler play SEMO this week.
Yep.
So we're going to have another comparison, just like we did with same area of the woods. Two teams played the same team.
Yep.
Notre Dame's going to Auburn. I do not expect Notre Dame to win, but that'll be a big game nonetheless. Butler's going to Michigan State. Again, that's that weird one. We thought that was that weird one where it was like Michigan State's like projected to maybe win the conference and Butler's projected to be in the bottom.
Yeah.
But then Michigan State turned around and lost to JMU. So
we'll talk about that here in a
You never
second
know.
too. But
and then the last one, another big game is Indiana going to the Empire Classic.
I'm really concerned about this game.
Oh my gosh!
I think that if
I wish it was a couple weeks later.
The team that we saw this week going to play UConn,
Yeah,
it's.
I mean, they're going to get laughed off the floor. Like,
you hope not.
They got to figure
But
something out.
They really, I think they've got one more game this week to get ready for that. So hopefully
They're going to be doing a lot of drills.
they're gonna talk a lot about defense.
Yes, and they got to figure out some way to score because UConn, and then obviously then the day after they'll have the second game.
Yeah,
in the Empire Classic.
Yeah, for sure. So looking like it might be Louisville at this point, which even I'm kind of concerned about playing.
Yeah, I mean, when you play down to a 330 ranked team and you have a close game with them, you don't want to have to play Louisville and lose. You'd much rather lose to Texas.
Yep.
But
yep.
Good luck to them, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. So, we talked about Michigan State losing, but we're big Indiana guys. Big state of Indiana guys. Can't tell. But there are 49 other states to talk about. So let's
check in on those.
Let's check in
see
on
how
those.
They're doing.
Are they okay?
They are not. They are not. You like to think that like a lot of the struggles is because they're having a lot of roster turnover or something, and everyone's to blame the transfer portal, but all these smaller teams are having, based on what we looked at, all these small teams
are in the same situation, if not worse.
Yeah. So it's what is going on?
Yep.
So I would just want to run down through these. So Michigan State loses to James Madison. Number 2, this one's not as big of an upset. Number 2, Duke loses to number 12 Arizona. Great game. It's on paper an upset, right?
Yep.
This next one, Chattanooga takes down fellow mid-major Louisville. JMU then goes on, dude, they are just electric this year. JMU then beats Kent State in double overtime.
Can I talk about that game for a second?
Yeah.
So Kent State actually put out a graphic at the end of regulation with the final score saying that they won.
Oh no.
Because JMU scored with they got the ball back with
they scored
1.2. They took like a steal.
It was like they scored like 5 points. They scored like 5 points in 3 seconds or something.
And there were 1.2 seconds on the clock, and JMU scored the bucket to tie the game to send it to overtime.
Yeah, that was absurd. Like I watched that, and then so they came back and they won, or they tied it up into overtime, and then to send it into double overtime, Kent State got like 7 points or 8 points in like a minute. It was crazy.
Freaking love mid-major basketball.
Dude, it's so nice.
I think it's the heart of college basketball.
So,
and that's the MAC Sunbelt Challenge. So
it was great.
Yeah.
And I love to see a team like JMU. They don't play, so they won against Howard today. They don't play another Power 6 team on their schedule.
Wow.
They don't have a single other team. Their next highest game, their highest ranked opponent on KenPom is App State in the end of January at 152.
Wow.
James Madison is 85th. So you're looking at a mid-major that might be able to run the table to the NCAA tournament.
Let's fucking do it.
I imagine that they'll win their conference tournament, but if they don't, I think they might have an at-large resume, especially with the win over Michigan State. Should probably age like a fine wine.
Oh yeah.
But Davidson beat Maryland, so something's wrong with the Big Ten because then UAB also beat Maryland.
Is it something wrong with the Big Ten or something wrong with Maryland?
Well, then
/ Michigan.
Michigan State also lost.
Yeah. Sorry,
but then Princeton also beat Rutgers.
Okay, something wrong with the Big Ten.
And then Nichols beats LSU on a buzzer beater.
Okay.
Presbyterian beats Vandy. So Vanderbilt loses to Presbyterian, and Georgetown loses to Holy Cross. First game of the Ed Cooley era, and I think no one has to be happier than Providence fans.
They were so mad at that decision, and now they're just like,
ha
ha!
That's exactly
Sucks.
what you get. Yeah, because Ed Cooley's a Providence guy. He's from from there.
Yeah.
And he goes to Georgetown, which I think makes complete sense.
I think
for a
Georgetown's
career. It's a better job. It's a better job. But
Yep.
dude, college basketball is not okay.
Nope. No. I do think that it's funny though, because we talk about it. Like, there needs to be more ranked matchups in the first week of the season.
Yeah, we had.
But all of these unranked, like a lot of these teams that lost are, they might not be top 25, but they're just outside the top 25. So it's just like, what would happen if the matchups were ranked? Like, that's just,
Well, Jaron, they already took a loss. You might as well take a loss
To a better
to
team.
number 20, the number 25 ranked team than the number 300 ranked team.
you're right.
So,
You're right.
Duke and Arizona was a great game.
Yep. Is Caleb Love Duke's kryptonite?
I think they're so happy that they never have to see him in that building ever again.
How do you think that Coach K felt
I love that he was there for it.
watching them lose to Caleb Love again?
Dude, I can't prove this in any way, shape, or form, but maybe Caleb Love transferred to Arizona instead of Michigan. Maybe it wasn't a credits thing. Maybe he was like, I got to play Cameron one more time.
You think he just knew?
I think he did. I think he was like, hang on, I'm going to do something. Let me do something real quick.
I mean, let him cook. Let him cook.
He's 3-1 in Cameron, and Kay had to watch. That was Shire's first loss in Cameron, I believe.
I wouldn't be
I
shocked.
don't think they lost at home last year.
I thought they lost to North Carolina at home.
I don't think so. Anyway, Shire, because North Carolina was just so bad.
That's true.
So,
true.
Caleb Love is just killing. He just loves to kill Duke. Baylor Auburn was also really good. But the thing for me is, I thought at one point the Champions Classic used to be on opening day, right? Or it used to be the first week. So I remember during the last presidential election, they moved it a week back.
Yeah.
Because it was going to fall on election day. So they moved it a week back, and then it just hasn't moved back the first week, which sucks. I mean, I love that IUPUI got to kick off the season, but there have to be better games in the first week.
Yeah.
The exhibitions are great. Purdue, Alabama was great. Kansas, Illinois was great. Michigan State and Tennessee was also great. Not Purdue, Alabama. Purdue, Arkansas.
Arkansas, yeah. The exhibitions, yeah.
They were great, but just make them regular games, dude.
Yeah,
I mean,
you can still do a fundraiser event as a regular season game, in my opinion.
I'm sure that Michigan State would like to have an overtime loss to Tennessee on their resume instead of an overtime loss to JMU.
Yep.
But that game, Raekwon Horton, he hit the go ahead three to give them the lead. Hadn't scored all night. Not a bucket. First game. Dude drives. He catches that. Dude, it's because he's Wu-Tang, man. Raekwon out here.
That's right.
So we need to fix the first week. But all in all, I mean, what did Indiana go this week? The state of Indiana.
18-6.
18-6, man. That's nice.
Yeah.
That's not bad.
No.
Especially, Southern Indiana did go 0-3, but they had two of the hardest games on the schedule.
I would agree.
Michigan State and St. Louis. So they played two hard games, and they were in it.
And both those games for parts of it, at least. So I agree.
And they had a chance to come back. They just couldn't pull it off in their third game.
Yeah, for sure. So that's really all we got for today.
Make sure to subscribe on YouTube.
Yep.
Hit the like button. It really helps us out.
If you like it, if you want to hit the little ring the bell button as well when you subscribe, you'll get notified every new episode, every Monday morning through the basketball season and even a little bit beyond.
Yeah, we'll see what the off season holds. But subscribe and hit the like button. Follow us on Spotify. Give us a 5-star review. Just really helps.
Yeah. Yep.
Helps. If you're an Indiana person, really helps us out. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, clock's showing quadruple zeros, so it's time for us to get out of here. Thanks for checking in on the State of Basketball podcast, and we'll see you next week. And remember, in 49 states,
It's just basketball.